Hi and welcome to a new series for ibass magazine. My name's Andrew McKinney and I'm head of bass here at Tech Music School. This series is going to be about time, feel and groove and what you can do to improve. I'm sure we all know that it's something everyone desires in a bass player. They're looking for bass players with a good sense of time, good feel and a good groove. So something that we actively desire and should be working on. So how do we go about that? Is it a case of you've either got good time or you haven't? If that were the case, it would just be like winning a lottery or something. There's nothing we can really do to influence that. It's just either yes or no. Now, obviously, I don't believe that's the case, which is why I'm here working on this with you now. I think that anyone at any stage can improve their sense of time and feel and work on this. And that's what I'm hoping to do with you. I can't give you a great sense of time, or I can't really sort of teach that to you. It's something you need to learn for yourself. What I'm hoping to do is guide you through a few things that I think are going to help. At the end of the day, if you spend a portion of time, watching this video or thinking about some of the things I've said, and you're actively focusing and working on your sense of time and feel, then you're bound to get some improvement out of that, whether you follow all my exercises and suggestions to the letter or not. Now, a word of warning before I start is that I've got to start off real simple. So it's going to be very basic and maybe not too exciting to start with, but before we move forward and do more advanced rhythmic concepts, we really need to make sure that we've got a solid grasp of the fundamental concepts. So really basic to start with, and then from there we can go into more advanced and hopefully exciting stuff. Whatever stage you're at in your career and in your learning of bass and music, there's always some improvements you can be made. So rather than just skip over this section, I urge you to think about the things that we're talking about here, look at the exercises and always ask yourself, am I doing this in the best possible way? Is there anything I can do to improve or get a stronger or more clearer sense of these concepts I'm talking about? And I think most people, well, I think everyone really will have some benefit from that. Later on in the series I'll be looking at other things, including different subdivisions, rhythmic groupings, phrasings, note lengths, using clicks, different types of grooves. So hopefully some exciting stuff that you'll enjoy. And as always, your feedback and comments are welcome. Please email me. Email address is with the text. Okay, thanks. Before we go too far, we need to agree some terminology so that we're sure that we're all talking about the same thing. This can be slightly confusing sometimes with music because often you'll find there's more than one way of referring to the same thing. Now the first thing I want to mention is what is often referred to as the pulse, or also can be called the beat for music. Now this is the same thing and it refers to the regular rhythmic backdrop to a piece of music. Now if I wanted to write this down, that would normally be represented by a quarter note, which can also be called a crotchet. Not all of the time, but most of the time it's represented by a crotchet. Now you don't necessarily need to be able to read music to get something out of this column, but I will be presenting these examples in written form so you've got another reference point. So this pulse or beat that's represented by a crotchet is normally, or most commonly, divided into chunks called bars, and the most common way of doing that is to have 4 pulses, so 4 beats, and then, as I said, represented by a quarter note. So this would be 4, give you 4 quarter notes per bar, the most common time signature, which is 4/4. So what we want to do is strengthen our sense of the pulse and beat and make sure that we're 100% accurate with that. So that's what we're going to look at now. Now, depending on the tempo of a piece of music, the pulse or the beat can actually be quite far apart. And we really want to focus on accurately aligning ourselves with that. Now, when that is quite a wide distance, the best way of dealing with that is to subdivide that gap. So we divide it in half or in half again. For example, exercise 1, we want to make sure that each of these note lengths are exactly right. So the first bar is quavers, also referred to as eighth notes, and there's 2 of those per beat. The second bar is the crotchets, which is 1 per beat, and then the third bar is half notes or minims, which are 2 beats long each. Now we want to make sure that they're not sort of roughly a beat long or 2 beats long, whatever they need to be, that they're exactly the right distance apart and that they fit in together with the pulse exactly perfectly. So, I mean, one of the common dangers with this is that when you're playing things that are busier, say the first bar, you've got more to do, so natural tendency is to tense up a bit whilst you do that and maybe speed up, and then when we get to, say, the third bar, where we've only got 2 notes to play, it seems like a very long distance between those notes, so sometimes we can switch off and slow down, or maybe even sometimes speed up with that. Anyway, there's a danger that we won't give these exactly the right length of time. So how we address that is by referring constantly to the subdivision. Now the subdivision for this example will be the first bar, which is the 8th notes. So the subdivision is the smallest fraction of time in a piece of musical groove that you're working on. So in this case it's the 8th notes. So what we want to do with that is make sure that we think of everything in terms of that subdivision. So even when we're doing the longer notes in bar 2 and bar 3, we're still dividing the time up constantly as the subdivision. Now, the best way of being 100% sure and totally accurate with the subdivision, the best way of making sure of that is to vocalize that subdivision. So that's count that subdivision out loud. We're going to look at this in exercise 2. So what you need to do is say the subdivision out loud all of the time. So in this case, it's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we would keep that going, saying that out loud. Now I would also recommend that you tap your foot on the beat, so you've got a solid reference point about where the pulse is. So our constant backdrop whilst we're playing these exercises is us going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now what that gives us is a very accurate framework in which to put any of the notes we want to play, regardless of how long they are or where they land in the bar. We've got like a grid which we can put the notes on. So it basically eliminates any element of guesswork. So we know exactly where the notes are falling and exactly how long they last. And with that backdrop, it almost becomes, hopefully, becomes impossible to play a note out of time. So what we do, what I recommend with this is to say the subdivision first, get used to that system, and then go into bar 1 where we actually play the notes at the same time. So just get used to going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then start playing the exercise like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just loop that around until it feels comfortable. Now the first bar is fairly straightforward because we're actually saying what we're playing at the same time, which is, in terms of coordination and independence, is fairly straightforward. Now in the second bar you need to play the quarter notes or crotchets, so you'll be actually saying more than you're playing. So this might take a little bit of getting together. Don't feel embarrassed if that's the case. You know, just spend a bit of time with it, loop it around until you get used to saying subdivision, tapping your foot and playing, in this case, the quarter notes. So the second bar will be like this. Give myself a bar in again. It's just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and again you can loop that round. Now that's great because I know each of those notes is exactly the right length. It's exactly 2 8th notes long and it fits in with the grid that I was doing for the first bar. So my timing from moving from one bar to the next should be 100% accurate. And then the final bar, the third bar, has got the half notes or minims, which are worth 2 beats. So again, I keep the subdivision counting and yeah, play those notes. So it'll be like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So throughout the whole exercise there, obviously when you get comfortable with this, you can just move from one bar to the next without pausing. But you know that every note is exactly the right length of time. So, like I said, it's a very accurate system. You've got a nice grid and framework there, and hopefully it becomes impossible to play out of time. Now, just a quick word about this subdivision. I'm asking you to count this out loud. It's a great way of enforcing yourself to address the subdivision 100% of the time, so that you don't just use the subdivision a bit when you're doing one of the bars, but then say when you get to the third bar you kind of drift off and your notes go out of time. If you're saying it out loud, you're forcing yourself to address that the whole time. But at the same time, I'm not trying to tell you that all musicians, or your favourite musicians, are on stage or in the studio, avidly counting 1 and 2 out loud. You may have seen people do that, but probably not that many, if you've seen any. But regardless of whether they're saying it out loud or not, it'll be something that they're ultra aware of. People with a good sense of time and feel automatically tap into that subdivision, whether they have that way of vocalising it or not. They may have another way of vocalising it. They might be thinking or whatever, or they may not even be vocalising it out loud at all, but it will be ever present in their mind. And this is what we're doing in practicing it in this way. Whether you then go into a live situation and still do that out loud or not is up to you, but hopefully if we've practiced like that, we've embedded that inside ourselves, internalised that subdivision feel, and then when it comes to a performance situation, that's something we don't have to concentrate on so much. It's something we've got there we can rely on, and we can think about other performance considerations at the time rather than counting that through. Okay, so exercise 3, I'm sorry, not very exciting, but it's exactly the same thing again, but this time we're going to do it with a metronome. Now I'd recommend starting at a comfortable tempo, like 60 beats per minute, and what we want to do with that is start the click, be saying the subdivision, tapping off foot, and then play through the exercises. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then playing the different rhythm values in the 3 bars. Now what we're aiming for this with the metronome is to be 100% bang on in time all of the time. So don't settle for any inaccuracies there, because if you're practicing and playing out of time at home, or when you practice, then you're practicing how to play out of time, which isn't very good. So yeah, do aim for perfection with that. And if you're struggling with it, if you've not done this before or used a metronome, there's it might be difficult to start with. It's something to get used to. So just take your time with it, and maybe if you're still out of time or not locking in with the metronome, then just go back a stage, go to exercise 2, stick with that subdivision, make sure you're ultra comfortable with that, and then reintroduce the metronome. Now when you're playing at home, the metronome can sound quite boring, so there's a tendency or kind of desire sometimes, if you've got some facility for making backing tracks or playing drum loops or a drum machine, that can be really great and sound good at home. It's makes it sound more exciting and more interesting. And in fact, if you are struggling with a subdivision to start with, that can be helpful, because often a drum loop, if you imagine the hi-hats, will actually be providing that subdivision for you. So that can be good in just working out how it feels and where it is. But really, we don't want to get too used to that, I would say, because this drum loop or whatever it is providing this backdrop for you, and then it's just a matter of you kind of resting in with that, just sitting on that, almost like a cushion, which you can sit on. So we don't want to be relying on any of that. We want to have this sense of time internalized. So I would recommend you stripping it back to just that metronome. And essentially, this sounds awful. It doesn't sound musical. It's not fun. But if you can sound good with a metronome, then when you get to play with a great drummer with a great sense of time and feel, you won't be relying on them to help you with the subdivision. It's something that you've internalized, and then you can outwardly project to the other members of the band, and it's just something that they can rely on, and something they can feed off of, and it'll mean that that you're excited to play with them and they want you in their band, hopefully. Okay, so the exercises today are all designed to get you to tune into that subdivision and make sure you're constantly addressing it. So the vocalizing it is a great way of doing that. But have a think about it. Maybe there's another way that you want to vocalize it. You don't have to use exactly that way of doing it. And whether you follow all the exercises to the letter or not, it's up to you. But hopefully there's something in there that you can take and apply to something that you're working on or doing. Or maybe it's just encouraging you to think about your time and feel in a new way that you can benefit from. So as always with this sort of thing, your comments and feedback are welcome, so feel free to drop me an email, and like I said, over the next few episodes and issues we'll be looking at various time factors and things we can do to help strengthen our time, feel and groove. So that's it for now. See you next time. Bye.